Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Los Angeles-based jazz vocalist, songwriter, arranger, and producer Sidney Jacobs. He talks about COVID life, his path into music, and his new 2022 CD, If I Were Your Woman. He is an exciting performer who likes to experiment, and he's not afraid to take chances. He's got great stories and wonderful insights. Enjoy this interview.
Yeah.
All right. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, I'm good, man. Thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for showing interest.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. Before we get into your latest album, If I Were Your Woman, I want to know, it's coming out during a time where things are changing. We're coming out of COVID. Live shows are picking back up. How does this release feel for you?
How does the release feel for me? I only have my last release to compare it to, really. And that came out in 2017, and I immediately was working around town and doing things like that and interviews like this. This is a little different because the majority of the album was actually recorded during the heavier part of the pandemic when we were all on lockdown. The recordings were kind of done piecemeal because of COVID restrictions and the protocols that we put into place to protect the musicians. So yeah, it feels, I don't know how to describe it. It feels a little different. I mean, I'm actually underwriting, new music for another project. But it's good. It's good to get it out. I'm very proud of it. But the environment has changed, and I've just started booking gigs in Los Angeles. Yeah, I think it's an interesting experience for everybody. But it's been a great time to write. For people that like to sit at their computer and create or do whatever they do, it's actually been a beneficial time for that.
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Joy, maybe a different reference point into some of these songs. I think some of the songs, from what I've heard, people didn't even know, so they're hearing them for the first time, so they probably seem like originals. But just something that's pleasing, hopefully can lift them up. There's certain parts of the album and all my music that I write that I'm trying to encourage people and trying to show a sweep of life. And but yeah, I just hope that they dig it and they can groove to it, really.
So let's go back to the beginning of your life here. How did you get this bug or this feeling to get into jazz? How did we lead to this road?
I mean, if we want to go all the way back, my brother, who is now deceased, but he was 11 years older than me, he was he had a true artist spirit. He was a flautist and a painter, and his musical and, artistic sensibilities, he was very adventurous. And I was just a little kid, so he exposed me to many of the heavy hitters of the 60s and 70s, 50s, everybody that we would know, Miles Davis, Ornette Coleman, Eric Dolphy, all of these guys. And my sister, who was 10 years older, she was like into R&B and Motown and pop music. So my household was filled with a lot of music and a broad sweep of music. And I've always just had an affinity toward jazz, but as a writer, I didn't feel like I had the chops to really write what I wanted to write, but I could hear in my head. And so I really took a stab at it in my last album, First Man, and it turned out well. I hired some great guys in town to kind of help me figure out the arranging. And this one, I just went further down that road, but I have a lot of experience as a singer. I mean, I'm classically trained. I've sung R&B and rock, hard rock, I've sung country, I've sung pop. I've done a lot of different, gospel and spirituals and opera. And so it's kind of all in me, as a musician. And my music is best expressed, I think, at least right now, through the vehicle of jazz, because jazz can, what is jazz? It can be so many different things. But really what it allows is a freedom of expression. So, you know, the R&B influences, some of the classical influences, and all of that stuff, at least in my head, Joe, it exists comfortably under the rubric of jazz.
What was the first live show that you ever saw?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. The first live show I ever saw was Earth, Wind & Fire, one of my all-time favorite groups, and it was a spectacular show. It was at the Forum in Los Angeles, and it had like magic and pyrotechnics, and I was 14 years old, and really, I don't think I've ever recovered from it. I remember asking my sister, because I'd never been to a concert before, and the only real reference I had for it was that footage that they had of the Beatles when they were at the Hollywood Bowl, you know, back in the 60s when they like debuted in America, and you could barely hear them because there's so much screaming going on. So I thought that was going to be it. I thought I was just going to be surrounded by people screaming, and I could barely hear the music. But yeah, man, Earth, Wind & Fire. I think I went to about 4 or 5 of their concerts, you know, in a row after that. They were amazing.
Talk to me a little bit about starting out. How does the stage feel for you? Is it a place that is comfortable? Were you nervous? Do you still get nervous? How does it work for you? Is it a second home?
When I was younger and I was doing top 40, you know, I was playing clubs when I was 18 with different bands around town. I've always very comfortable singing and when the music starts and kind of just folding myself into the sound and the experience of it. And I think my performances of style has come out of that. But I was always afraid to talk to the audience. So in between songs, I did not know, you know, what to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to look at people. But as soon as the song hit, I was fine. I've grown since then. And now being surrounded by great musicians is one of the most comfortable feelings that I can have. But I've also been aided by, you know, being able to, I'm in the fifth dimension, the actual original fifth dimension. There's still one original member who owns the group, and we tour all over the country and the world. The 5 years that I've been in that group now has really helped my stagecraft. I've learned so much because it's a different way of performing. You know, they're really entertainers. My thought, my sensibility, especially if I'm like in a trio or doing some jazz stuff, is not necessarily being an entertainer, but I'm just a musician. You know, I'm the singer, I'm the vocalist, but I'm a musician. And doing all of these shows with the Fifth Dimension and then some other groups that I've been able to hit with on occasion, it's taught me that, like, people want to be entertained. Even in the jazz realm, you know, people want to be entertained. I'm not talking about doing dance moves and splits and everything, but the singer's obligation on stage is, I think, a little different from the drummer or the pianist, even if the pianist is a lead, you know, even if those musicians are lead musicians. The singer is facing the audience. The interface with the audience is much more intimate. There's nothing to hide behind except a little microphone. All of that is developing as I do it more and more. But my mindset about being on stage is changed over these last few years, just being out with this wonderfully professional group. So yeah, the stage is very much a home for me. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the Weave the Tail video, but if you haven't, I'll send it to you. And that's kind of like where my performance energy is at. I'm very much into, you know, what's going on. You can kind of feel the music flowing through my body. So yeah, being on stage it's an exhilarating, you know, experience for me.
And with that being said, you know, now that we're getting back to live music and the world's waking up a little bit.
I lost you, man.
Oh,
you, Joe.
Sorry.
I don't know how I lost you now. I lost you in my headphones. Did you hear my answer?
Okay. Yeah, I did. Yeah. I think it happened when I was asking you my question. Can you hear me better now?
I can. I lost you in my headphones.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was just so busy rambling. I didn't know.
No. You're good. And I got all your answers. So what I was going to ask you was, you know, with that being said about live music and the power of it, what do you hope we all realize about the power of live music as we start returning back to it more and more?
I'll just go out to a club. when you feel comfortable and safe enough, there's nothing that can replace live music, you know, with all the technology that we have. And I'm not a person opposed to technology at all. I use it all the time. There's nothing like going to hear musicians come together, coalesce, and create something right in front of you. It's a magical experience, and I don't think it's ever going to get old, man. You know, so there's that experience. There's the experience of seeing these guys and women play the actual instrument, hearing the coordination of what they're doing, the listening, the respect, the spiritual nature of what they're doing. But then there's also the experience of being with other people, having that same experience, like going to the movies. We are communal creatures, and we will always be communal creatures. So being in this pandemic, you know, has really injured a lot of us because we've been cordoned off from one another and isolated. But I don't think it's going to take much convincing once people go to a couple of festivals or, you know, plunk down their money and go to a concert, and you get in that theater, you hear that music, man. There's nothing to replace that. Not yet. You know, we haven't invented the androids that can mimic the experience on stage for us yet. So, I don't think there's going to be much convincing, Joe. As soon as folks get out, they'll let out that long breath that they've been holding for, you know, these 2.5 years we've been in this thing.
You know, every day you get to wake up, you get to create music. What is the best part of being a professional musician for you?
Just that. That's the best part, is to do what I was doing 5 minutes before you called, just sitting and trying to figure out another puzzle, trying to figure out these pieces, how to end this current song, how to start another song. It's incredibly challenging. And for me, I've kind of taken, even though I do have a lot of experience, I took a different path to become a true professional musician. I had a family when I was younger, and I wasn't making any money as a singer and studio musician. And so I went back to school and got a couple of degrees and started working in the world. So now that I'm back doing this full time, it's a privilege, you know, a blessing. I'm trying to think of the right word to encapsulate it. For me, it's just a challenge to get up and write music and try to complete these projects that I do. It's a true blessing whenever I get to perform, because I feel like you're just spreading love and you're spreading joy, you know, to people. You're making people laugh. When I tour the country with Laugh and Smile, when I tour the country with the Fifth Dimension, it almost feels like missionary work, because, you know, then especially coming out of COVID, where people have not been going out to shows, like you say, and we tend to play a lot of the middle part of the country. They don't have a lot of entertainment coming through. So when you can come through and you see the effect that it has on people, they tell you, you know, I haven't been this happy in years. And like, come on, man, that's about as good as it gets.
So everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. Who do you think you are?
Yeah. This sounds like a therapy session, man.
Yeah, right.
Well, that is evolving. That is evolving almost on a daily basis, who I am. And as I get older, my perceptions of myself and the world change, you know, hopefully with some wisdom, but certainly with experience over time. I would like to think of myself as a compassionate person, a good person, one who wants to see the best in people. And I want people to figure out how to live together, because I think that's really the challenge that we have as a species, is to figure out how do we break these divides that seem to be so naturally formed in our beings, in our minds, you know, and our perceptions of the world, and get beyond that, because we do know that we're only our best when we're working together. It's like a house divided can't stand. well, it's the same with society and people. So I would hope that I'm a person that whose energy, when I put out into the world, is an energy that makes people feel welcomed and like they belong. Because that's how I'm trying to feel in this world. And I don't, there's many times as a black male living in the United States that I don't feel like I belong, But I think that as a species continue to evolve, that's how we're going to have to figure it out, because otherwise we'll destroy ourselves.
Indeed. Sidney, thanks, man, for opening up. Thank you for taking some time out. Good luck with the album and the return to the stage. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats and players in Los Angeles, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Sidney for his time, music, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. And you can also visit joedomino.com and kick in a little bit there via Patreon or PayPal. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.